from here and what lessons can we get from this presentation? So introducing UNOC, Uganda National Oil Company was incorporated in 2015, wholly owned by Government of Uganda with 2 subsidiaries, with 2 shareholders, Minister of Energy and Minister of Finance. We have 7 board members, and we have 118 staff, and all of us are Ugandans. We have 2 subsidiaries. We have the National Oil Pipeline Company and the Refinery Holding Company. So UNOC operates across the value chain. We have projects in the, also looking at launching new ventures, as you'll see ahead. We also have, in the midstream, we are in charge of the refinery, the industrial park, and then we are also going to be shareholders on behalf of Government of Uganda in the crude pipeline. We have storage terminals, and we are also into bulk trading. So those are all national content activities where UNOC is participating, but we need to understand that in Uganda, UNOC, the National Oil Company, is not in charge of licensing or regulation. We have a spectrum of different institutions. Like the Petroleum Authority is in charge of regulation. The Department of Petroleum and the Ministry of Energy is in charge of licensing, and UNOC is the commercial arm. And then we have the Ministry of Finance as the fiscal region mandate. UNOC has a big mandate as Uganda's National Oil Company, but the main one is to handle Uganda's commercial interests in the oil and gas sector. But among those objectives, there are virtually 2 main ones that talk about expertise in the oil and gas sector, upstream and downstream ventures, initially locally and later internationally. So as a national oil company, we have the responsibility of making sure that we do not only stop at doing business in Uganda, but also internationally. Where is the Uganda project today? Uganda's first oil project, we expect a final investment decision soon, but in the upstream venture, we have blocks E and Total, and each one of them with 33.3%, and UNOC holds 15% share in each of the exploration licenses. Definitely, this is only about 10% of the Alberta and Graben, and Uganda has other fields. So Uganda is really going to be big when it comes to oil and gas exploration. We are looking at a refinery, which is mainly handled by UNOC, and UNOC holds 40% in the refinery project. And then we have the East African Oil Pipeline Project, where UNOC is going to hold approximately 15% on behalf of the Uganda government. And that is how UNOC's participation in Uganda's project value chain looks like. In the Telenga project managed by Total, we have a 15% equity. Kingfisher, we have 15% equity. Kingfisher is run by UNOC. And then in the Kabale Industrial Park, run by UNOC, UNOC is going to get a 49% shareholder, and we are going to hold 41%. In the refinery project, we already have a joint venture partner, and we are holding 40%. And then in Kampala Storage Terminal, we're going to have an equity of 51%. In the East African Oil Crude Pipeline, we are going to have a 15% equity. So as a national oil company, you see how much we are invested in making sure that value is retained within Uganda. But also UNOC is not going to stop there. UNOC also looks at going into exploration on its own. As we are holding the government interests in the other exploration and development license. We partner strategically and begin exploration. And then after we have started operations, we will look at how fast UNOC can be able to actually be able to operate on its own. And so we believe that from first production of our UNOC oil, maybe in a time of 10 to 15 years, we will have acquired the skill to be able to operate as any other international oil company, but starting first in Uganda and then going all the way to become an international player. So what is UNOC's national content approach? Since we are talking about local content, in Uganda we call it national content. UNOC has an approach. Virtually, it all starts from the national oil and gas policy. Then it goes into the petroleum laws and regulation. And also we have a national content policy for the petroleum sector of Uganda, which has given UNOC the mandate precisely to make sure that national content happens within Uganda. And we are given 4 mandates to champion the development of local expertise in the oil and gas sector, to promote and participate in joint venture initiatives in the oil and gas industry, develop the capacity of Ugandan citizens and enterprises in the oil and gas sector, and then to champion local participation within the oil and gas sector, which is something that we are looking at. And we have looked at a number of elements that we are going to use to be able to achieve this. We have a strategy for employment of Ugandans, strategy for employing of Ugandans, strategy for utilization of goods and services obtainable in Uganda, proposal for knowledge transfer and technology transfer, and then a proposal for research and development to be carried out for the oil and gas sector within Uganda. So UNOC also has its main strategy, and in its strategy is based on 3 strategic themes: building the business, investing in people, and partner strategically. Well, many people have it in different ways. They say, okay, you have to partner strategically first, you invest in the people, and then the people build the business. And whichever way, but these are some of the national content achievements we have done. And we have used these 3 strategic themes to actually come up with our national content strategy. And the UNOC's national content strategy, when you look at it from a glance, we are recruiting of Ugandans, capacity building of Ugandans, and then we have supplier selection, operatorships capacity, and operations capacity. And we're going to look at each one of those. UNOC, as a national oil company, has gone to be able to ensure that value is retained within Uganda. So on the recruitment of Ugandan talent, we actually now have 118 staff, 100% Ugandans, and we are looking at the future where we will have definitely diversity and inclusion, and we are looking at a target of having 30% internationals and 70% Ugandans. And we believe that most of these internationals can actually come from the African oil and gas countries that have already developed their oil and gas activities, countries like Nigeria, Angola, and others. We believe that we can actually get some resource from there, but also we are looking at Ugandans in the diaspora to make up part of the 70%, and we are already attracting many Ugandans who are working in the oil and gas in the diaspora. They have come back to join the National Oil Company, and together we build Uganda's oil and gas sector. We have supplier development capacity initiatives. And here we have so far spent 83 million on supplier capacity in the past 3 years. But we are not stopping there. We do actually activities with other players like GIZ, and we are now have entered into a memorandum of understanding with Stanbic Bank Incubator to upskill Ugandan suppliers. We know that most of these things we cannot do them alone. So UNOC is so much into joint ventures to make sure that whatever we do, we partner with somebody who may have better experience than us, but also build our capacity as we go along. And we are looking at different areas of training. We will look at technical, financial, HSC, and as you can see from understanding oil and gas for even the media fraternity, procurement processes, many national companies, indigenous companies are very, very good at what they do, but they have a challenge of responding poorly to bidding documents. And we believe that that is one of the areas we need to look at. And then the HSC requirements for oil and gas are very stringent compared to other industries. Maybe you can compare them maybe to aviation. So from that, we always look at how can we upgrade the HSC systems of our different sectors, whether it is logistics, whether it is manufacturing of iron bars, whether it is catering services. So we keep on having different engagements for the different supplier groups to make sure that they actually can fully participate, not only for UNOC, but for the whole oil and gas sector of Uganda. And most probably we want them to develop a skill that they can even offer these services across to the East African region first, and then beyond, because all the countries around us, Kenya, Rwanda, DRC, Southern Sudan, they all have oil, and some of them really do not have the capacity to be able to do it alone. So we believe Ugandan companies, when they develop that skill, they can be able to acquire international skill. Now we look at national skills development. And this is where we are training other Ugandans and UNOC staff to be able to participate in the oil and gas sector. And we are really looking at closing all the gaps. We want to be able to operate at the same level. Something we are really striving to do, and we believe we'll get there because we are doing it professionally and also looking at partnerships with other institutions to make sure that this is done. When we look at procurement activities, UNOC so far has spent 70% of its budget has gone to Ugandan suppliers. So this is also a good thing, but as we go ahead into more complicated areas, definitely we'll be getting in more international suppliers, but we are going to make sure that whatever work within those big contracts awarded to internationals, whatever work that can be done by local suppliers is actually contracted to local, attracting foreign direct investment, asking international companies to come and set up in Uganda and qualify to as Ugandan companies, because all it takes is to be registered within Uganda. You have 70% of your employees Ugandans. You are adding value to the economy. You have offices here, and then you can qualify as a Ugandan company for indirect investment. But also, UNOC is also looking at operatorship capacity. We talked about this before, where we are looking at becoming international players in the oil and gas sector. And this is something that we believe that from the time we produce our first oil from the UNOC fields, within a period of 10 to 15 years, we should be able to operate on our own and also to start having a footstool on the international market. And UNOC is looking at a number of midstream and downstream operation services. We are into bulk trading now. We are sourcing for a partner for the Kampala storage terminal, which we are going to construct. We have an ongoing feed for the refinery project. We are planning to set up oil services company. And so, as a national oil company, we are doing this much to make sure that local content is developed and value is retained within the country. And this is the glance of how much we have done: 118 staffs, trained over 469 suppliers, spent over 4.5 billion on capacity building. We have spent 19.4 billion on suppliers, and 82% of that money has gone to Ugandan companies. And then we are into other projects. The refinery, 40% will be retained by UNOC. We have ginger storage terminals where we own the facilities. We have Kampala Industrial Park, Kabale Industrial Park, where we are going to retain 51%. And we are also working on the Kampala storage terminal. In addition, we already have 15% in the Tilenga run by Total projects, 15%, Kingfisher run by UNOC, 15%, and we have also applied for our own exploration licenses. So with all that national content achievements, UNOC is really, and UNOC is only 4 years old. So you could imagine this has been done in 4 years, but we believe if we go ahead with that same pace, we'll be able to catch up very quickly. And within 10 years, we expect to have a footstool in the oil and gas sector. So what is the role of national oil companies in the oil and gas sector? What we need to understand that but right now, the oil reserves, 90% of the reserves and 75% of the production is within the national oil companies. And you know, how has this happened? They have increased access to capital, expertise, and technology, and then they have built in-house capabilities to operate independently. And actually, a number of national oil companies are now operating internationally, like Petronas, Petrobras, and others. So it is really something we have players we can look up to see how much national content we can achieve for our economies, not only stopping at getting it from within the country, but also from international areas. Also, effective national oil companies generate strong financial returns to the state. They have healthy national content policy and strong technology, environmental, and social commitments. So these are really roles that are played by national oil companies. But one thing we have to remember that not all national oil companies actually have the same objectives. There are countries that have had national oil companies when they did have a drop of oil. And there are those who set up their national oil companies basically to take care of the oil and gas resource they have. So when you look at a country like Kenya, they set up their national oil company before they had a drop of oil, and that was to import and market fuel products. You look at a country like Namibia, their national oil company is the sole importer of oil and gas resources. And then you look at countries like Senegal, they definitely are into refining to support fuel consumption within the country. And then South Africa, before they also discovered oil, their strategy was to create employment beyond the oil and gas sector. So oil and gas can be used, even when a country is not a producer, they can use the oil and gas resource to actually build their economies and create local content. And for resource-rich countries, there are nascent players like Uganda. Basically, the National Oil Company was created to support the framework, oil and gas framework. Then there are countries like Ghana. They have gone into capacity building to be established in the industry and build core competencies so they can do it fast. And in Ghana, what they did was to train massively for oil and gas, every person who wanted to study. So they know they can build their resource, but also export the manpower. And you look at countries like Nigeria that have well-developed core capabilities. For them, now they are playing the role of resource custodian. So they have to make sure that they get as much value as possible from the resource, and their national content plan is actually based mainly on being a custodian and making sure that now this resource goes beyond just getting the rent, but also making sure that the Nigerians themselves participate. And then there are national builders like Algeria and Angola. For them, their oil resources being used basically to support national development through employment and diversification. So the money they get from oil, they use it to support other sectors of the economy. And that is how they have actually grown very fast. But there are also those that are foreign ambassadors like Angola and Algeria still. They have well-established positions in other countries and regions. And this is how, so when we are talking about national oil companies, we should not say that one blanket fits all. Each national oil company has a different mandate depending on the mandate it has within its own country. But as we are looking at this, that, okay, what do these companies really have in common, irrespective of having different objectives? Well, national oil companies definitely play an influential role to increase the percentage of local suppliers. So supplier development is a given and in any country, and making sure that locals participate in the oil and gas sector. And then the national oil companies nurture entrepreneurship. So many businesses are started up at the initiative of the national oil companies that were not in the country before, but because of the oil and gas sector, so the national oil companies support these enterprises to start up or to be developed, to be able to take on activities that are required within the oil and gas sector. In Uganda ourselves, we carried out an industrial baseline survey, which mapped out the goods and services that can easily be produced in Uganda or started up. And we had a number of them started up, like the hazardous waste management facilities for oil and gas that we didn't have before. And national oil companies also earn oil wealth and spread it to build other sectors of the economy. This is a focal point in all roles of national oil companies, whether they are from producing countries or from countries that are basically importing oil to be able to build their economies. Okay, and the successful national oil companies have built capabilities and capacities to be able to compete with international oil companies on the world scene. We have seen a number of them that really have said, no, our local market is not enough. And this, we look at the Malaysia's Petronas, Brazil's Petrobras, Norway's Statoil, okay, and Nigerian NNPC is also looking at the West African economies now to be able to be a player within the other economies. And so national oil companies are becoming more and more international operators, and this should be the way to go, unless if a country has too much resource that the national oil company can actually be comfortable just working in the domestic market. But we have seen the likes of Petronas, Petrobras, and Statoil operating internationally, and they are actually succeeding and bringing more revenue to their country, but also creating more employment outside their own economies and bringing more value from outside their countries into their respective economies to build them. And so national content, when we look at it, we should not look at it from only a domestic perspective, but we should look at how can we extend it if the Chinese and the French and the British are going out there investing in other countries and they take repatriate profits. We should also be doing the same with our national oil companies and compete with international oil companies to be able to create more value. Of course, we still have challenges in Africa, and these definitely need to be addressed. We have the challenges of technical standards for the oil and gas industry. We have the challenge of qualifications and certifications, especially for us, the nascent oil and gas producers. We do not have enough manpower to be able to do all the work in the oil field. So most probably, even with massive training, we'll still have to import in some people to do work that could easily be done. And then access to finance and high interest rates on borrowing is also a challenge for many of the national players. And then skills development for Ugandans recruited by contractors. The contractors will also need people, and that is where in Uganda we have succession plans, where when a company comes in with an expatriate is given a work permit for a specific period of time, but by the end of that time, they should have developed or a Ugandan to replace them, or at least to do a bigger percentage of their work. And then the other challenge we have is the low levels of industrialization that limit the benefits to the countries. For instance, when you look at steel, we manufacture, like in Uganda, we have steel for normal construction, but when it comes to steel required for the oil and gas sector, I mean, we may not necessarily have the industries that can fabricate or manufacture that kind of steel. So all these things hamper national content, but we are working on them. The beauty of it is that we know where our challenges are. And so many national oil companies are coming up with strategies to make sure that they deal with these challenges. So what is the role of national oil companies in driving local content? We have to understand that we have seen local content champions, but those national oil companies that are local content champions, there are things they have done that we also need to do as the nascent producers, the Tanzania, Uganda, Mozambique, Kenya, Southern Sudan, and others. These national oil companies have done three major things. The first one was to put their houses in order. So what are we supposed to do? We need to transform into professionally managed, efficient, lean enterprises that can compete favorably with international oil companies. We need to bring our managerial and operational competencies to global standards to match those of international oil companies. And with the technical and managerial capabilities at the same level with international oil companies, this will go a long way to make our local content thrive in the oil and gas sector, and also value retention. Also, the national oil companies that have been successful have groomed world-class suppliers. They have supported their suppliers, and they're looking at it, the localization, how do we build the skill of our local suppliers, even as we are attracting foreign direct investment. So this we are doing as part of our strategy. We are doing it through supplier development programs, but these supplier development programs need to be highly invested. So that's where governments are really required to support the development of local suppliers, because these local suppliers will eventually be able to pay mega taxes and value retention and create jobs if these jobs do not go to internationals. They need to also realize that ring-fenced contracts can only have a limited impact. So for instance, if you say, oh, these goods and services are ring-fenced for Ugandan companies, yes, it can work in the short term, but long term, it makes people to become tunnel focused. It does not give them the capability to go beyond those areas that have been ring-fenced for them. So as international oil companies, it also becomes our responsibility. As national oil companies, it becomes our responsibility to make sure that we develop our suppliers beyond the ring-fenced projects so that they can be able to actually take on more robust and more challenging technological services that are required of the oil and gas sector. We also need to develop highly educated workforce, therefore support the growth of local suppliers. The training of a country's work resource is the responsibility of the government, not of the IOCs, not of other players in the oil and gas sector. So as countries, we need to make sure that local manpower is skilled to the quality and level required of the oil and gas sector. And we need to support our nationals to get that skill and be able to work in the oil and gas sector. Ghana has done that And now once Ghana has trained its people, now they mandate the international oil companies to recruit them because these people already have a skill, as opposed to countries that expect the international oil companies to come in and train their manpower. Okay, also national oil companies, not just startups, as well as large establishments of companies, of existing companies to the next level. Here we look at startups. Say for instance, like I said, in Uganda, we did not have hazardous waste management facilities for oil and gas. But once we carried out the study, then all these other opportunities were highlighted, because the biggest challenge is visibility over demand. People not knowing where to invest and what is required of the oil and gas sector. But with that study, Uganda was able to establish that. And now a number of startups have happened for hazard waste management, for production of cables and all other facilities, fabrication yards, which didn't realize that they had work before. But because of the oil and gas sector, they are doing it with the support of the National Oil Company. And National Oil Company must develop viable industry clusters. And these viable industry clusters, we are talking about not you just going ahead and doing everything. You need to understand the local context. You need to understand what can be done within country, who can do it and what. But synergies basically in the downstream value chain of petrochemicals, fertilizers, and fine chemicals are places that can really build a lot of national content and retain a lot of value. UNOC has gone into refineries. Definitely those cannot support, that cannot maybe be managed by single individual investors in Uganda. But as a national oil company, we have gone ahead and taken up all those big challenges of storage facilities, bulk trading, and all those things that can be able actually to retain a value in local content is expensive. So national oil companies, through their governments, in order to maintain a competitive edge, must sponsor incubator programs, provide seed fund, research infrastructure, technical expertise, and direct company investment into the other sectors of the economy, so that these companies can also grow and be able to actually take on the work that could have gone to expatriates or international companies and be able to retain the value home. UNOC is taking that route. It is challenging, but we believe we will get there eventually. So what are the characteristics of successful national oil companies? Like we said, that different national oil companies have different objectives. So there's no one size that fits all. But successful national oil companies share some traits. And the best knocks, they channel capital, technology, and operational know-how into the country. They make sure that the standards required of the oil and gas sector actually brought into the country, disseminated, and support their local suppliers to be able to attain them. They serve as custodians of their nationals' wealth. Definitely, national oil companies make a lot of money, but they don't have to just spend it. They use it to build the respective economies. They also help insulate socioeconomic development strategy from pulls and pressures. This is how do we make sure that the money earned when the oil price is low, we are not going into a state of emergency, and when the oil prices are high, we don't go into spoiled spending. And how do we make sure that whether the oil price is low or high, we have to be able to say that the country is not going into socioeconomic challenges. They also got their integrity as the countries move through economic cycles that I have explained is very related to the first one above. And they maintain a steady course in the quest for global competitiveness. Global competitiveness is the order of the day. And this they do through research and development. They do it through skills development. They do it in all different sorts of innovation, partnering strategically, investing in their people, and building their business to go beyond what they are doing now. So global competitiveness is the order of the day for national oil companies, and national oil companies that do not look at all this global competitiveness to build their staff, to build the local suppliers, they may be doing a disservice to their economies. The best national oil companies serve their interests, and they serve the country's interests best when they bring global standards to their home countries. So there are two things that need to be done. Basically, and national oil companies need to build domestic capacity. Why do they need this capacity? Because most of these projects are done as joint ventures. They need to have the capacity to negotiate with oil companies. You don't want a national oil company going into a joint venture with another company, and actually the person you're going into a joint venture with knows a lot more about the industry than you do. And you keep on giving them all the benefits that even if they say you are retaining 50%, you end up getting like 15% of the money. Okay, they also need to build that capacity to manage the oil industry. We talked about this. They need to build the skill to support industries and non-oil economy. We talked about this. And also technology transfer required skilled workers to absorb it. There's no way you are going to get into a joint venture with a technically competent person and you expect that you have people who are not technologically skilled or who do not have the skill to absorb that technology. It will not work. They'll say, well, we'll try to help them, and they failed. And knowledge transfer is a key component of developing national content. We need to learn from others. Where have they done it right? And also to learn from those who have done it wrong, so that we don't go through the same challenges that those countries have gone through. But also, as we are doing this knowledge transfer and technology transfer, we need to understand our local context. What capabilities do we have as a national oil company and as a country to be able to absorb the knowledge transfer we are looking to acquire? So national oil companies also, it is very, very critical that they train their employees, they develop the skills of their employees. And why should they do this? Because still of the joint venture challenge, they need to attract the most qualified investor for the long run. There's no reason why you attract somebody who is going to rip you off. But also a skilled workforce maximizes economic return to the state because they'll be competent in what they are doing. They earn and retain public trust and manage public expectations. Definitely, this is one thing that a skilled workforce will be really able to do. But the most of all is that they increase local content benefits to the broader economy. So when you get this money, how are you going to invest it to be able to build bigger capacity, to be able to bring more value into the country? And they build capable national organizations to participate and oversee the development of the resource. Definitely, this is a no-brainer. Every country that does not have a capable organization to oversee the development of the oil and gas resource definitely has lost a lot of value because they are not aware of what they are supposed to do. And then it also increases accountability because a skilled workforce will know when they are being lied to, when they are not earning as much revenue as they do. And also, most importantly, they really preserve the environment. Oil and gas is very destructive to the environment, and a skilled workforce will know when the joint venture they are with or the company they are working with is not taking good care of the environment. So in conclusion, we need to understand that how do national oil companies really support local content? One, in essence, national oil companies are local content themselves. They are created virtually to retain value within their economies or to create it. They employ, develop skills, build national competences, and they also give priority to use local goods, services, supply involvement, and also workforce. What do oil companies, national oil companies need to do? They need to re-engineer to be profitable in the low price era, diversify their services across the value chain and beyond, like UNOC has done, partner with international participants, develop strategies with a commercial mindset. That all requires skill and knowledge, and that is where training is very important. And also, national oil companies need to practice operational excellence. And this is all what we have talked about. A leadership that transitions employees into high performance teams by training and skilling them to actually operate excellently. Also to understand how value is created in a country. That is the only way we can be able to say that, yes, we are adding value to the economy by understanding how value is created in the company. And also the most important part is the ability to make excellent decisions. Once the decisions you make for your economy are excellent, there's no way but local content going up and up and up. And that is where we have seen Statoil, Petronas, and Petrobras, excelling at whatever they do because they have built the competencies of their employees. They are making excellent